So we left with the summing up of chapter 1 and the setting for the book of Job. What we move on to now is after the first three verses, when God says, "Have you observed my servant Job?" again, after you, Satan, you've done all this stuff to him. And so we get to verse 4 in chapter 2, and Satan answered the Lord and said, "Skin for skin, yes, all that a man has he will give for his life. However, put forth thy hand now and touch his bone and his flesh. He will curse thee to thy face." And so the Lord said to Satan, "Behold, he's in your power, only spare his life." So now Job's lost all his possessions, and now Satan has authority from God to touch him physically. And so verse 7, then Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and smote Job with sore boils from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. And he took a potsherd to scrape himself while he was sitting among the ashes. Can you imagine, just you've got all these boils and stuff, and you take like a rock and sharp rock, and you're scraping yourself, scraping all these boils off your body. So he was sitting among the ashes. And then verse 9 is a classic here. And don't quote this one, when you're quoting the book of Job as a good reference. Then his wife said to him, "Do you still hold fast your integrity? Curse God and die." So you can say, I read in the Bible it says curse God and die. Well, it does, but it's not something that you want to promote. And this wasn't poor advice. The only thing Job has left now, basically, is his wife. And his wife says, curse God and die. Okay, not very good help at this point in time. So that's kind of the setting of what we come into this whole picture, is Job has been severely afflicted, and yet he's keeping his testimony in that he's not cursing God. Does he have questions? Yeah, the book is all full of questions the rest of the way. This book is some really wonderful passages and things that have been quoted. Some of the more famous Old Testament quotes come out of Job. In fact, the one that we read in chapter 1, 21 and 22, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return. The Lord gave, and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." That's one that's been talked about a lot, songs written about it. There's some great quotes out of Job as we look through the book as a whole. I'm going to skip through. I'm not going to really cover a whole lot. There's some interesting things. Job's friends that come, that becomes later. If you've got friends like this, you don't need enemies. But the way they talk to him, and of course, I've got to throw this one, and this is nonsense, but it's funny that we say the shortest guy in the Bible was one of Job's friends. His name is Bildad the Shuhite. Shuhite. That's not very tall if you're just. Shuhite is spelled Shuhite, not like a shoe. But anyway, that's pretty small if you're only shoe height. But some of the more famous quotes, we mentioned the one God gives and he takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Chapter 13, verse 15 is one of a classic. It says, "Though he slay me," in this version it says, "I will hope in him," or "Yet will I trust him." It says in, I think, the King James. And so it's really just saying, and Job's in that place. He feels like he's being slain. He feels like everything's been taken away from him. Says, "Yet will I trust him." And what a place to be. The New Testament talks about, remember the patience of Job, or the long suffering of Job. And, how he maintained quite a testimony in the middle of this, although, he wasn't without complaint. He wasn't without contention. He wasn't without question. Because even in this, in verse 15, it says, "Though he slay me, I will hope in him. Nevertheless, I will argue my ways before him." So he's saying, I'm going to trust him, but I'm still going to ask questions. And here, I think the asking of questions, a lot of people figure if they ask questions, they're in some kind of violation of something in God's eyes. Well, it may be to a degree because Job got rebuked in the end, but it really is part of the human condition when these things come upon us. Like even now, some people are waiting for God to intervene in situations in their lives, or for situations in our nation, for situations like that. And we're saying, God, where are you? What are you doing? And we're asking questions, but there's still that deep-seated trust that you're going to do something. I just wish I saw it sooner. I wish you would work better on my timeline. And what person in the Bible doesn't have those questions? It's amazing that they're throughout. When we get in the next book in the Psalms, it's just raw emotion, on those kind of things. Like, why are the wicked prospering, God? What's wrong? When are you going to do something about this? And in this case, it was Job saying, I've been righteous. And in God's eyes, he was. Not that he'd never made a mistake, but he did everything to cover those mistakes. It'd be like he was fully repentant. He was, we would say in our day, but yet he was arguing the ways of God. Why aren't you, supporting the righteous? And then you got all of his friends just saying these things against him. God, why aren't you contending on my behalf because of my friend? Listen to my friends. What did you say about me to Satan? I think I heard something about he's a righteous man and there's nobody like him. And so why don't you say something? Tell my friends that, but you don't see that. So there's this time, this big section of time where there's just questions. There's no answers. There's suffering. There's adverse circumstances. There's contentious friends who, just aren't giving you the best advice. And they came to comfort, and now they're your biggest critics. And they're just saying, hey, you just need to look deep. Why would any of this happen to a righteous man? And that's the whole contention through the book is, if you were really as good as what you're saying about yourself, Job, why is all this stuff happening to you? And we see that kind of question throughout the Bible, and there's reason. I mean, there's biblical reason why you would ask that question. Deuteronomy at 28 and 29 talks about if you do these things, bad things will happen. If you do these things, good things will happen. And so there's reason for that. And yet there's times when that's not the exact equation. In the New Testament, they said, why is this man blind? Was it his sin or his parents' sin? And Jesus said, you're asking, basically, this is Ed's paraphrase, you're asking the wrong question. He said it was neither of the sins. This has been done for the glory of God, and then he glorifies God by healing the blind man. Okay, so it wasn't done for anybody's sin in particular. And that's what the whole contention throughout the book of Job is. Job saying, I've been righteous. Why is this happening? His friends are saying, if you were righteous, this wouldn't be happening. And so that's the argument going on throughout it. So I'm going to look at, jump way ahead to chapter 38. And it's really interesting here. God starts to ask Job questions, like questions that would humiliate you and humble you and take you to the place of, okay, I really don't know what I'm talking about. God is now appearing to Job and confronting him, and Job isn't justifying himself any longer. It says in chapter 38, verse 4, God says, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who set its measurements since you know? Or who stretched out the line on? So here God's just saying, he's asking questions Job can't answer, and putting, telling Job, says, you really aren't as powerful as you may think you were. In verse 12 in chapter 38, have you ever in your life commanded the morning and caused the dawn to know its place? He's just asking things that Job cannot answer, and just has to humble himself before God. So all of chapter 39, he just keeps asking these kind of things. The first verse, do you know the time the mountain goats give birth? Do you observe the calving of the deers? Can you count the months they fulfill? Or do you know the time they give birth? He's just saying all the things that are happening in the secret places among all the animals of the earth and everything that's going on. I see that, I'm observing that, I control that. And so he just keeps asking these questions all throughout chapter 39. We get to chapter 40, and verse 1, it says, then the Lord said to Job, will the fault finder contend with the Almighty? Let him who reproves God answer it. Then Job answered the Lord and said, behold, I am insignificant. As Job actually sees the Lord, he comes to this conclusion, I'm insignificant. I wasn't there when you laid the foundations of the earth. I can't do anything about that. He says, what can I reply to thee? I lay my hand on my mouth. Once I have spoken, and I will not answer. Even twice, and I will add no more. So here is Job. He's not asking questions anymore, and he's not justifying himself. He just says, okay, you're a majestic, I'm insignificant. I just spoke. I shouldn't even have spoken. I'm just speaking again, that's it, that's over. And that's the way we conclude here in chapter 40.